Hey, what's up, cats and kittens? And shout out to all my Cerebralites. It is me, the Cerebral Diva, and I'm back with another episode of In the Loop. And in today's episode of In the Loop, we're going to be talking about sports phenom LeBron James. And we're also going to be talking about an ignoramus by the name of Jason Whitlock, who up until today I have never heard of. Apparently, he's a sports writer of some sort or a sports commentator. But I'm not familiar with him in any way, shape, or form, but he is definitely on my radar as of now. But before we get into that, take a second and do yourself a favor and do me a solid while you're at it. Hit that subscribe button, and once you've done that, take another second to hit that tiny little bell so you can turn on your alerts, and that way you will be kept in the loop. Now that we've gotten all of that out of the way, before I even delve into what I have to say, I want you guys to hear LeBron James in his own words. So give me just 1 second here.
And I think back to Emmett Till's mom, actually. It's kind of one of the first things I thought of. And the reason that she had an open casket is because she wanted to show the world what her son went through as far as a hate crime and, being black in America. No matter how much money you have, no matter how famous you are, no matter how many people admire you, being black in America is tough.
LeBron, to me here, is embracing his victimhood. This is not the racism that needs to be stamped out in America. This is an inconvenience for LeBron. Someone spray painting something on a millionaire's home.
He's not a victim in that situation?
Hell no.
He was victimized?
It's nothing, Chris. It wasn't that big of a deal. If someone denies you an opportunity, you can't go to school here, you can't have this, you can't have that. That is the impact of racism.
Okay,
LeBron was inconvenienced, and racism affects the poor, the very wealthy. If you're innocent and say no matter where you are, it's tough being black. It ain't tough being LeBron James. It ain't tough being Oprah Winfrey. The wealthy have regardless of color, have a far better chance of overcoming whatever unfairness happens to them than people that are not wealthy. This man getting spray painted on his front door that he never saw, his staff cleaned up, it's an inconvenience. It's not racism. It's not being denied a job.
It is racism. He didn't spray paint jerk on his door.
He can speak out and say, you know what, this was terrible. Whoever these individuals were, it was stupid. But the people that really are impacted by this are the poor people who face discrimination.
Okay, so for those of you who may be slightly miffed by what you just heard, let me see if I can catch you up to speed. So LeBron James, aka King James of the Cleveland Cavaliers, is currently playing in the NBA Finals. Now, while he's out working, doing his thing, winning championships, some bigot with way too much time on his hands and maybe $5 extra to buy a can of spray paint decided that it would be a cool thing to do to deface LeBron's home with racial slurs. So after a recent win, reporters asked LeBron during a press conference his thoughts on that particular event. So that's what you heard. Subsequent to that, you heard a man by the name of Jason Whitlock. And Jason was addressing LeBron's addressing of the defacing of his property. So first of all, for LeBron, kudos to LeBron for really taking the high road in this particular instance. Sometimes, I really strive to be that elevated where I can take the high road, but sometimes it's so difficult for me to do that just because I feel like empathy is how some people learn. They cannot relate until they've gone through it. So when you start to disrespect people, then they start to suddenly understand exactly what it feels like when they're disrespecting others. So sometimes when you take the high road, I feel like there's no consequence for that. People don't have to atone. And so it's difficult for me to take the high road because I'm a proponent of tough love in some instances. So shout out to LeBron for being able to do that. So even though LeBron took the high road, Jason Whitlock was bothered by that. He's basically, and I know some people may get mad at me for what I'm about to say, but I think that there was an element of truth to what Jason said. And before you jump down my throat, just listen to what I have to say. What Jason was essentially saying is, well, not essentially saying, because I'm not going to try to encapsulate his train of thought. But part of what I took away from what he was saying was that there's a difference between classism and racism. And that I do agree. Well, I agree to a point. In America, I think that sometimes we are so focused on race that we don't understand that there's a class war and that there's the poor versus the rich. And we get so caught up in this whole gay versus straight, black versus white, man versus woman, that we're really missing the mark in terms of what we should be focused on. And that is class, because that's where the real discrimination lies in many cases. Now, where I differ from Jason is that I don't believe that classism and racism are mutually exclusive. Those two things can exist in the same space. It's not like if you have one, you can't have the other. They don't repel each other. Sometimes they can attract. And we've seen that case in point with the election of Donald Trump and with the backlash against Barack Obama. When you look at Trump rallies, for the most part, when you look at the states that he won and where a lot of his support was garnered, a lot of that was galvanized within poor white communities who were turned off by the Black Lives Matter, turned off by seeing a black president, turned off by a lot of things that had to do with color. So even though they're poor, and even though they have a lot of the same experiences that poor black people have, for whatever reason, the fact that they're white makes them feel superior in some way, shape, or form. And when they felt that their whiteness was under attack, they rebelled, by voting for Donald Trump. And so for this man to sit there and say that, you can't be discriminated against if you're rich, that's the most asinine thing that I've ever heard of. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination. Do I do okay? Absolutely, I do. I've predominantly lived for the most part of my adult life at least, I've lived in affluent communities. Now, it's not that I live in affluent communities because I have an aversion to people of color. That's not the case. It just so happens to be, this is the places that I like happen to be in affluent communities. That's my taste. So when I'm in these communities, very often I see people sort of raise eyebrows, look at me sideways, like, what is she doing here? How did she get here? Who does she work for? So I can see that sometimes on the faces of people who live within my community. There was one apartment complex that I lived in where I was the only black person, the only one. And I'm telling you, I felt so completely out of place in that particular complex that I ultimately wound up moving, not just because I felt out of place, but just because I didn't like it after a while. But I think that it's ridiculous for this man to imply that LeBron James, for whatever reason, because he's rich, is somehow immune or not susceptible to racism or discrimination. It's not the case. You see, let's take Serena Williams and I forget, Maria Sharapova, I believe her name is. Her endorsement, even though Serena is the biggest female tennis star pretty much ever, her endorsements were dwarfing Serena's. And why do you believe that is? Not because she's a better tennis player, clearly, but because she's not Serena Williams, for lack of a better phrase. So it's just crazy to me, but people will make that out to seem like that's just happenstance, that there's not racism involved in that Maria, for whatever reason, is just more marketable. Yeah, she is more marketable. She's more marketable because she's white. So I don't understand why these people want us to buy into this fallacy that racism is not a problem in America. We all know that it's a problem. It continues to be a problem. And it just pisses me off when I like to call these people soul sellers. They form like a old school group. The soul sellers include Omarosa on lead. You have Sheriff Clark. You have Ben Carson. And now you have Jason Whitlock. And they all comprise the soul sellers. Because I get that the black community is not a monolith. That we all have our own individual experiences. But to be black in America and to deny racism, to me, means that either you're woefully ignorant or you are happily subjugated. And I'm not either of the two. My eyes are wide open. And now, having said that too, I don't want to throw all white people under the bus and say all white people are horrible, all white people are terrible people, because I don't believe or subscribe to that either. I know some very good people, non-black people. I know some of my, oh my God, I'm not going to even say that because that sounds so cliche. I know some really good people who happen to be of different races. So I don't believe that one race is better than the other. This one it's greater in this particular respect. I believe that good people are good people. But do I believe that our culture in America is permeated by racism? Absolutely. And I think Mr. Whitlock, I don't know where he lives. I don't know what his thought process is, but I think for him to dilute LeBron's experience by saying because he's rich that there really is no impact is utterly ridiculous. Having said that, you guys, I'm going to get ready to get out of here. Please make sure you comment below. I would love to hear what you guys have to say. Remember to keep the comments respectful. If you don't, if you know, I filter all of my comments. So if you say something disrespectful, chances are I'm just going to delete it and keep moving. But if you say something that's contrary to my own opinion, if you want to have a constructive criticism, you're definitely welcome to do that. Now, with that being said, I'm going to get ready to get out of here. So remember to follow me across all social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. And as always, in closing, remember to live better, love harder, and think smarter. It is me, the Cerebral Diva, and I will talk to you guys again soon.